All right, welcome. I will have you know I'm not a professional radio person, comedian, none of that. I am actually a therapist and a poet, sort of used to be a poet type writer type thinker creative person, and oh damn, I don't even know how to go about doing this, but anyway, I've decided that I want to do podcasts. I've been a writer for most of my life and always tried to get my ideas across that way, but I've decided that things are getting kind of crazy and it's time for me to break out of that form, and hopefully I'll survive just speaking to you. I've been very worried about what's going on in our world for some time, mainly around issues of free speech. It's, in my opinion, it's systematically being destroyed, and I've had firsthand experience with that. I have been, honestly, frankly, full of tremendous amount of despair over it, and I've lost a lot of sleep and listened to many people, thinkers, philosophers, academics, all kinds of people who are beginning to come forward and talk about this problem, and I haven't really seen anyone address just sort of the psychology, of how to actually live through this time in history and be, I guess, a good person, maintain a sense of virtue and graciousness and just all those good things that make us like being alive. It seems to me that there's been a nihilistic kind of ugliness that's been introduced that I feel somebody needs to speak against. I'm not going to be here giving all sorts of facts and resources, and I just can't go down that rabbit hole. I don't have time. I have a job. I do have a private practice, and I've been seeing clients independently for, well, since the early 2000s, so quite a long time. And I have just felt that I feel very alone as a therapist, because I feel that most of my profession is just sort of going along with what's kind of business as usual, being pulled along in a fashion that I don't necessarily agree with. And I wouldn't have ever thought that I would need to speak out or say anything about this, but times have changed. And I worry about other people who may feel the same kind of silenced despair that I feel. I do not think that the thoughts and feelings that I'm having are in any way unusual, but I do think that I'm unusual in that I have always kind of had a very deeply personal relationship to my own self and my own authority. Even though I couldn't necessarily express that in the world, I've always had a deep trust in my instincts that was latent for many years. But in the last 5 years, I've come to realize a lot of things, mainly through blogging. I had a number of blogs, and I had some success in a small kind of way, like a certain little grouping of people really liked what I wrote. But it was always just a small grouping of people, and I was still really kind of searching for what I needed to say, and I was formulating my ideas. I don't want, this is not a blog, or this isn't a blog, this is not a podcast about politics. However, it's just almost impossible not to talk about politics anymore. That's something that I find very difficult, and I want to discuss that. But primarily, the reason why I'm starting this is because I want to be a calm voice and an encouraging voice and a compassionate voice to younger people, maybe even people who are as old as me. I'm basically a middle-aged lady. I've lived, and I feel like it's my time to give back and be here for people who just need encouragement. I'm almost going to start to cry because I have actually listened to a number of people online in the last year or two who have literally kept me from feeling crazy. And I will admit it, I listen to them sort of obsessively. Sometimes I found their voices and their reasoning and their measured way of being so contrary to what is given to us in the media and what you just see in the world. So because I guess I could list off those people, but I don't necessarily know if I need to do that right now. But people like Roger Scruton, he was probably the first one a few years ago. I think it's been about 2 or 3 years, when my daughter turned me on to him. He had spoken at a realist art convention, I think in the Netherlands, and he talked about fake culture. And I was pretty taken by the way he formulated his arguments and by just his embodied sense of his philosophy. And I think that is another piece of what I'm wanting to do in this podcast, is how to help people to live a more embodied life. That seems sort of funny. I guess it's sort of an existential idea. I am an existentialist in some ways, meaning that I really believe that we need to live our lives and live what we think and what we believe and strive to bring what we think and say into alignment. I think that helps us to gain authority, and I think that gives us a more makes us more plumb people, like flush. And I think we need to be that way in this world. Recently, I guess in the last 7 months, I've been following, a lot of people, but one professor in particular has kind of really helped me organize my thinking and in such a profound way. And I think he's done this for so many people. And that is Jordan B. Peterson, who's a philosophy professor at the University of Toronto. And he's recently been going through, or I'm not going to say he's been going through, he recently decided to step into the public arena and address what's been going on with political correctness. Watching this happen, what has happened to him, has been incredible to me. I have listened to his lectures. I think he has like 500 hours worth of lectures that he just gives people online. It's incredible material. Really, there is not a mind like Jordan B. Peterson's that I've encountered. And the way he synthesizes religious mythology and anthropology and just all great wisdom, he brings it alive. And that's something that I find really useful. I don't think that the atheist movement has been helpful at all in helping people to understand themselves. And I'm kind of an atheist myself, but I am not an atheist in that I do believe in looking at these mythologies and religions, and I even believe that if you decide that you want to live by one, simply because it's nice to work with a coherent system, I do believe that it can transform you. And one thing I do want to do on the podcast, and I think I mentioned this in my little about blurb, is I want to translate religious words for secular people, or people, I guess secular meaning people who don't necessarily believe in like a personal God, but translate them in a metaphysical sense so that people who want to participate with religious systems can do that without, because honestly, we need to find places to express these ideas, and our world is so consumeristic and nihilistic. It's a wasteland. I don't mean to sound terrible, but we're living in a wasteland. That's why I'm doing this now, because I want to help others who are living in the wasteland. There's a lot of mental illness. I, as a therapist, have been tremendously heartbroken and dismayed by by what I've seen. I've worked with a lot of teenagers, and just seeing the brokenness, the routine and normalized level of brokenness has made me feel like I need to say something. And I all of the values that we used to abide by, shared values, you didn't even need to be a religious person, but shared values, those have been systematically deconstructed, which that's what we've applied our new sense of consciousness to doing, is deconstructing values that were very embedded in us and unconscious. And because they were unconscious, they had a lot of power. And I think one thing that I'd like to do here is I'd like to work on making the values that were once unconscious, I'd like to bring consciousness to those values, to redeem them. Not to say, I think that they can be redeemed, and I think we need to redeem them with our consciousness. We can't just destroy culture. We need to reinvent culture. And I see a lot of that going on these days with the hipster culture, in a lot of ways, trying to bring back certain pastimes and traditions and hobbies and things like, curing meat and brewing beer, or making your own spirits, or knitting, or whatever. I think these are ways to try and hold on to a past that we have been kind of forced to abandon for so many reasons. A past that may not have been perfect, but I think it was embedded in us, and we embodied it. And to be told to become conscious is to become aware that you are in a fallen state by today's standards, secular standards. It's not a bad thing in and of itself, because I do believe that that's something that we all need to realize, is that we are, in a sense, in a fallen state. But I don't want the state to tell me I'm in a fallen state. I'd much rather learn it the religious way, even without a God. So I can tell I'm losing you all, but please bear with me. So so back to Jordan Peterson. I have been feeling like I want to be able to be a presence and a support to people who he inspires, or you know how when they say, the counselors will be available in the gym because there's been a trauma or whatever. I feel like the world right now is going through a trauma, and I want to be one of the counselors in the gym. And it just is. So I want to devote some time to talking about different aspects of what we're going through, mainly focusing on how can we be good in this world. I've been very frustrated in done a lot of thinking and writing about why. Well, there's a lot in the news with social justice warriors, for instance. And there is a type of individual, if you like see the social justice warriors, the protesters. And I've been thinking about my own feelings about these individuals and why it is they literally make my heart explode and collapse and weep all at the same time. I can't put my words on it, but I was watching Jordan B. Peterson, Professor Peterson. He was being attacked by them a couple days ago because he was having a little session at his campus on free speech and trying to explain what he was doing. And he was there and ready to talk to them. And there were some supporters there. That was amazing to see. I was so happy that those kids were there, and that I just was so happy for them that they were able to have this amazing professor. And I wished that all kids in college could have a professor like Jordan Peterson. But I felt sort of like, that scene in what is it, Dead Poets Society, Robin Williams, my captain. I sort of feel like he's, and you would think, oh, how corny, we don't think that way. Nobody's a captain. Nobody's allowed to be a leader. Everybody's flawed. And we make sure that you don't believe in anyone and you don't trust anyone. And that is just, okay, I don't want to swear. I'm going to take a sip of wine. That is wrong, okay? You just want to believe that somebody is good and can actually see that they're there to make it so other people can be good. And I really felt like that watching him. And I just thought, he's my hero. And it was great. My daughter sent me a text saying she'd seen him at the protest. She, watched it online, and then I watched it again because she'd seen it, and I thought, well, I want to refresh, just go, what did she just see? And she's 20 and she's really into him, and she's been following him for a while, and I worry about her all the time because I don't know how she's going to manage in this world that doesn't allow her to express and to love and to have and to love beauty. It's not encouraged. She can do it, but it's sort of like you have to you don't get rewarded for doing good things. You don't get rewarded. You get rewarded if you scream and shout and demand and, make yourself look like a ghoul. I think that is what's so hard seeing the social justice warriors, is that the people who are actually trying, the people who have in the past, you learn these things, you follow the rules, you learn to put yourself aside, you learn to think about the bigger picture, you learn to realize that you're not the center of the universe. These are all very important, incredibly critical psychological developments so that we can get along as people. And this used to be just a part of what you would learn when you would get a humanities degree, or I got an English degree back in the early 90s. I was kind of late because I actually went to a religious school for a couple of years when I first graduated from high school, but then I kind of had a crashing of my faith because it was a little bit too confining. But then I went on and I got an English degree, and, I got to learn about these great ideas and themes and the world and the struggles that people have. And even then, that was the early 90s, and political correctness was a really big deal then. And a lot of the stuff I was doing then, I was having to look at a lot of the texts, as they would call them, through critical theory. And, when I read Crime and Punishment, I had to look at who were the oppressors and who were the oppressed. And I was smart enough to kind of see through that. I was a little bit older. I was in my mid 20s, or yeah, like 23 or something when I started that. So it wasn't terrible, but it was it wasn't huge though. It wasn't like it was a big deal on in every part of the campus, and it wasn't taking over the world. It was just sort of there. But anyway, so my daughter, she's into Jordan Peterson, and she is looking for a freaking hero. I mean, she's looking for somebody who can inspire her and who can make her feel like there's a reason to live. And I'm so excited that she listens to his lectures, and she's in an art school. And anyway, when she told me that she saw him in this, being attacked by these people and standing up, she just said, she just wept. And her car, and it was raining, and she sat in her car outside of her art school crying. And the image of that makes me want to cry too. But I didn't even know that she was feeling that way, but I was in my office waiting for a client to show up, and I was watching it, and I was crying, and I was so overcome with how much sadness I've had about not having a hero, not having anybody that you're able to look up to. I mean, my God, I've looked up to Atticus Finch my whole life, okay? And this year, of course, everything that I've ever loved systematically is just going away. So this year a book comes out, and I think it's like, oh, it turns out Atticus Finch was a racist. So it's just, I'm sorry. It's like, this is the person who when I was a kid, my dad, such an incredible man, actually, he was probably my last living hero. He was actually, this is kind of probably part of my story, but he was actually killed when I was young, and it was very, sudden, and nobody had any warning, of course. And he was killed on a construction site because he was he'd always worked in construction, and so it was like a tragedy. Anyway, so I always looked in my mind to my dad, thinking about how my dad would do things, because he was just, honestly, I am so lucky that he really, it's not just because he was killed, he really was just an incredible person. And anyway, but besides my dad, I always thought Atticus Finch, who everybody loved Atticus Finch, the thing, he loved his children, and he treated them with dignity, and he kind of like got into their heads, and he thought about how they saw the world, and he slowed down, and he was just a beautiful person. So every time I'd be going through life, I would think, who do I want to be like? And I always thought, I want to be like Atticus Finch, and I want to be like my dad. I want to be somebody who other people look to as somebody who's good, And I guess, I don't know if they would cry, but I'm crying because the world just needs more people like that. And so when I make my choices, whatever I do, I think of somebody someday wanting to know that somebody is good, and that there's somebody who they can count on. And I think of those people who showed me by an example, even if one was fictional, that like the lasting effect a good person can have on you. Because even though I lost my dad when I was 11, throughout my whole life, he's always been with me. And when other people would criticize their parents or say, my dad's an asshole and he does this or that or the other thing, I always just have this image of my parents as being like, they never talked about being good ever. They just simply were doing their job. They got up, he went to work, he came home, he cleaned up, he kept our house nice, he built our house, he kept the property clean. He never I don't remember him ever being cruel to anyone, but he was not weak in any way either. He was definitely a man. He had a presence. He was a little. He just inspired so much respect. He was calm, and sometimes, well, always when we went to church every Sunday, but of course it was only church on Sunday. It wasn't a big deal. It wasn't like all week long there was talk of the scriptures or anything like that. It was very much just you go, and it was a Catholic church, and I remember he would he actually sang the songs, and he had a kind of a gravelly voice. He was tall. He was like 6'2", and he had a really round head and thick wavy hair that was like graying because he was older when he had me, because I was the youngest of a big family, kind of like a late in life child, because Catholic, but it wasn't a big deal. But he loved children, and anyway, I just remember he sang kind of loudly, considering nobody else sang the songs in the Catholic Church. It was so tepid, but he sang those songs, and it would embarrass me because I could see other people would actually turn and sort of notice that he was singing the songs, and then it would be over, and the church would be over, and we'd get back in the car, and we'd go home, and we didn't live very far from the church. But I didn't realize that, he just did what he thought was right. He didn't make a big deal out of anything. He never talked to me or explained to me what he was doing. He just lived his life in such a pure way, so straightforward. He never yelled at my mother once. He took her dancing every single Friday night. He held her tightly. He loved her. She had her problems. But he just, he treated her so well. And she, was very traditional, stayed home and took care of us and took care of the house. But she was just a sweet, sweet person. And anyway, so when I think about what my life has felt like, to think of my father as just a wonderful, pure man he wasn't from a self-conscious generation, He was from a generation that just, you didn't have to be conscious of everything. You were supposed to just live it, right? I don't think we can live that way anymore, but I appreciate the honesty that just living it, what that looked like. And that's what I mean by existentialist, is it's easy to talk about things. It's easy to get ahead of yourself. And especially in the age of information and with the information economy, we, as my daughter would say, we don't have the patience to live our lives. We want to skip ahead. So we want to say more than we can do, bite off more than we can chew, So what I want to do, I'm not brilliant like Jordan Peterson or Roger Scruton or any of the other great people here on the internet who have these big followings. That's not what I want to do. I want to just be a daily, or I don't think I can do this daily, but I'm going to try for a couple times a week. I want to be a presence to anybody out there who wants to live holy. And I don't think it's an easy thing to do in our world today. And I think we need guidance. And I have made it my life work to do that. And I want to share that with other people. I feel like I need to get out from my office and share more with other people. And, yeah. So I don't really know what else to say. My husband is upstairs making chicken wings because we're trying to, have a nice night. There's going to be a storm, or there has been a storm, and our gutter was all like blocked up. It was pretty dramatic. I actually came up with a solution, but it probably wasn't right, but we're going with it for now. So I should go upstairs and have some chicken wings, but hopefully I covered everything. I want to be here. Let's talk about how to live a beautiful, sacred life and not be made ugly by this culture war that we are living through. Okay. See you later. Bye.